All right, so for repetition, please, you can open these two links up and this will give you a really good primer for it. But the definition of repetition is basically you're looking for a line, a pattern, a shape, or some other visual element that is repeated. And this can be in the natural world or in the human world, or in other words, the organic repetition that you might see out in the world, or the synthetic repetition that you might see in a human-built structure, city, house, neighborhood, whatever. And then you can also stage repetition by using ordinary items that you can find at home. So I'm going to show you some examples of that too. And then talk about like what the impact and effect might be of using repetition. So when you go through, you see some pretty good examples here of repetition in colors. Opposite patterns, you have a repetition here, a repetition there, and it's not all the same thing, but they're both being used. The repetition of the light pattern of the waves and the repetition of the umbrellas. Here's a good example of organic patterns, leaves, flowers, etc. And then there's also abstract patterns. They don't necessarily need to be exactly the same. And you can see the repetition here in this example. And then it goes on to talk about rhythm and repetition there, and then a breaking the exact repetition pattern. If you look in the Unsplash link, there's a lot of really good professional examples of repetition. And some of these are things that you can do or find, like this example of the National Geographics. If you have a collection at home, you can use that. Even texture, and this crosses over a little bit into texture, but if you see a repetition pattern like this, you can use that as well. And again, the goal for your folder of 20 photos is to find as many different examples of repetition as you can. Each one should be a unique image. So that's that. And so again, these two to just show some examples and discuss. And one here, back when social distancing wasn't a thing, this was the repetition that I was kind of had my eye on, was the lights, the chairs, and especially these patterns right here. And I probably could have zoomed in on that and made it a little bit more abstract, but I thought it was interesting. This was an image that I think qualifies as repetition. It's not even this spacing, but it was a day when there was ice on the ground and salt particles were thrown, and I was kind of interested in the shadows and the pattern that formed. For a while I was looking at these berries that grow on a tree, but also particularly interested in how the raindrops formed on them. There's another repetition of flowers and lines. There's another one of the berries. I shot that photo because these are growing in a marsh area. And then again, it could be a man-made structure. A deck has a lot of repeated forms. The repetition of the screws that hold the deck plates in place, the repetition of the boards, and how you decide to frame that will change the look of the image. There's a lot of different ways that I could have shot this, but that's the angle that I chose. But also there's my foot. Also, pavers and patterns that you see out would be good examples. So I'm trying to tailor this to things that you should be able to find within the house or outside of the house if you go on short walks. And I think that if you go out on a walk looking for things that repeat themselves or patterns, you'll find quite a lot. Again, there's my nature one, leaves. This was a pattern, and I could have gone a little bit wider, but I just noticed that a lot of the retaining walls in the neighborhood had that, or landscaping in different areas. I happened to see these flowers falling. We called it snow, like pink snow on one of the trees. And this kind of brings me to another point that it doesn't just need to be the repetition. The repetition could be part of a bigger photo. And I want to express that through this image right here, where I'm using kind of a rule of thirds of putting my daughter Lucy in the upper left intersection point, but then using the repetition to place her in a time and space. And I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that you can use elements of repetition to tell a story and to enhance a photo. It doesn't just need to be repetition for the sake of repetition. The other example that I wanted to share was this one right here, because it gives you an opportunity to make repetition photos at home by looking for things that you can arrange and create patterns that are synthetic, but not things that you find, but a synthetic pattern that you create for yourself and then take the picture. So with all of these things, I think it should give you quite a lot of options for what you decide to do for your repetition photos, but I think that you should focus on those for the next couple of days. Just focus on repetition, and then on the next day, we'll talk more about texture. So I hope this is helpful. Please feel free to email if you have any questions.